Thank you all for joining us this morning. Welcome. My name is Anna Stinson. I'm the Director of Programming for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. Thrilled to see such a strong turnout this morning for this program. I think this is, Heather and I were just talking, this is perfect timing for this sort of thing. I think we're all in need of some self-care, and self-care looks very different these days than it has in the past. We will be recording this session and you'll receive a link once it's available. Feel free to go ahead and submit your questions as we go along in the chat section below, and Heather will try to get to them as we go along. I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Our events would not be possible without our generous sponsors. Our premier sponsors are CenterPoint Energy, Lohman Abdo, SDK CPAs, Sunrise Banks, Voya Financial, and Excel Energy. Our supporting sponsors are McGough and Mortenson, and our event sponsors are Allied Parking and Firefly Credit Union. Thank you all so much for your support. You are much appreciated. So this is the last Executive Women's Council program for 2020, and I cannot think of a better way to cap this year than learning to care for ourselves and have some self-care through these chaotic times. Some of you who have been attending the series for a while may remember our speaker from the last time she was with us. I am so excited to welcome her back. She's got a little bit different take on things now. Heather Welpley is a speaker, coach, and author that recently published her first book, An Overachiever's Guide to Breaking the Rules: How to Let Go of Perfect and Live Your Truth. She has led virtual workshops and keynotes with thousands of people on overcoming perfectionism, creating your own rules for success, imposter syndrome, which she did for us last year, and our topic today, wellness and self-care in the new normal. Prior to owning her business, Heather worked in a wide variety of leadership development and human resource roles. She has a master's degree in human resource development from the University of Minnesota and is a graduate of the Coaches Training Institute. You can read Heather's blog and get more information about speaking, coaching, and her book on her website, heatherwelpley.com. Heather, thank you so much for being with us here today. I do want to note that Heather's in Colorado now. She moved since she was with us before. And one tiny silver lining of going virtual for all of our events is that we can do things like this and have speakers who are not right here in Minneapolis. So Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me again, Anna. And I loved the group that we had last time when we did Imposter Syndrome in person downtown Minneapolis. So I'm excited for all the people that I can still see streaming into our session today. And yeah, I agree. This could not have been planned at a better time. Little did we know when we put this on the calendar that 2 days ago, you were going to be getting significant more restrictions and that numbers of COVID would be climbing and that self-care and wellness would look maybe even different right now than you expected it to a few weeks ago. And so this really is that time. I think you're going to get a lot out of our session today. And really my goal is that you can leave here with a few practical tools that you can use for true self-care, what I call true self-care, which is really around managing your emotions and creating a plan. So what we're going to be talking about today here is the emotions behind that ongoing uncertainty, which I have no doubt you are all feeling right now. Like I said, maybe even more today than you were just a few days ago. So talking about the why do you feel this way? What are the emotions behind it? How to take care of yourself in a new way, and probably a different way than you might have thought of before. So while there's nothing wrong with bubble baths and massages that we often think about when it comes to self-care, this is going to be a little bit different kind of a self-care that we're going to be talking about today. And then finally, we're also going to be talking about setting boundaries and expectations, which is also a part of that self-care. So this is going to be interactive. We're going to be using the chat a lot because you all have great ideas to share as well in all of these arenas. So I want to be hearing your thoughts and getting you to be able to interact with each other and hear the thoughts you have to share and ideas with each other as well. And we're going to start that right now. So I want to hear from you. What is your biggest challenge with wellness and self-care right now? So go up into that chat function and just make sure you're hitting it to everyone, which is the automatic. That should be the normal there. And then share what's your biggest challenge with wellness and self-care right now. It's going to be probably different for everyone. So just take a moment and share in the chat. Finding the time. Yeah, work-life balance, finding the time for yourself. I'm seeing time is like almost everyone on here so far. Not enough exercise and too much snacking. I hear you on that one, Esther. Not enough hours in the day. Time, just balancing time. No social outlet. Terry, yeah, I am an extrovert who lives alone, and that has definitely been a challenge for me as well. Remembering to take breaks. Yeah, this balance with keeping your kids focused on school. Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit about mothers in particular briefly about why this is so challenging for you. My office is my gym, is my bedroom. Yeah, Dana, you pretty much just hit the nail on the head with all of those things right there. We'll talk a little bit more about how to set some of those boundaries before between those places in later on in the session. Yeah, time, getting motivated to go outside when it's dark, absolutely. No commute to decompress. Yeah, Nikki, we'll talk a little bit about that because that's part of this boundaries piece is you used to have a commute and transition time for many people and you don't anymore. Yeah, not enough time. All right, so we're going to we'll talk more about all of these things and what does this mean and how can you find or create some of that time by setting different boundaries and by making self-care more of a priority. So we'll talk more about that without understanding. I know that we all have limited time in the day, so this isn't about, how do you suddenly find an extra 2 hours, but I think there are small things that you can do to really manage that self-care in a different way. So thank you so much for jumping in and sharing. We'll be sharing several different times in the chat during the session as well. And if you ever have a question, I'll pause several times to ask for questions. You can certainly put it in there as well. And if I miss it, because I won't be looking at the chat the entire time because it's a little distracting as a facilitator, if I miss it, you can jump back in later and ask it again. All right. So then let's move into this piece around the emotions behind uncertainty. Now, this graph that you're seeing on the screen, I did not create this. This is a combination of the William Bridges model of change and the Kubler-Ross grief model, which is kind of interesting to think about. But there is grief associated with uncertainty, with any kind of change. And the stages that you're seeing on here go for any kind of change. So organizational change, personal change, anything like that. And really, what we're going through right now is ongoing change. It's just ongoing change that doesn't necessarily have a deadline or exact vision or an exact place that we're moving to. And so wanted to share a little bit about the emotions that happen behind here. So if you think back to COVID when it started, and I should also point out, we'll be grounding primarily in COVID today and the pandemic and kind of the emotions and uncertainty behind that and what you can do in relationship to that certain circumstance. But know that 2020 has not just been about the pandemic. We know that, right? The election causes a lot of uncertainty for most people in our country. We had a lot of racial justice work and injustices happening and subsequent uprisings, which caused a lot of uncertainty and emotions in people. Fires, hurricanes, I mean, just so many different things that 2020 has brought to us. And we're not necessarily prepared to deal with all of that on an ongoing basis. And that's where these emotions come in. And that's where the real self-care comes in that we're going to talk about in a little while. All right, so if you think back to the beginning of COVID, that awareness piece was probably about a year ago now. We originally heard about it, but then there's a lot of denial, at least I know on my stage, of like, well, yeah, but that's not going to come here. Those things have happened in the past. They're not going to come here. And then even when it did start to show up a little bit in the United States, I know there was still a lot of like, well, it's not going to be that big of a deal. No big deal. Then it did start to build, and there's always going to be an anger stage at some point of whether it's anger on how things are being dealt with, from a government or policy standpoint, or anger at plans being canceled. All of those different pieces, just that anger is very, very normal to feel. Then as you move down in this curve, you see the depression. I have no idea why this is called the neutral zone because it does not feel neutral to me at all. But this is the low productivity, overwhelm, high anxiety, often low energy, sadness and despair sometimes. Just that place of like, oh, this is hard and we're here and I don't feel like I have the capacity to do a whole lot right now. And I'm guessing a number of you are in this place right now, which we're going to be sharing in just a few minutes. But, and yeah, so that low point in energy, productivity, and emotion. Then typically with change, you kind of come out of it. And I don't know about you, but this past summer and early fall, I definitely felt a lot of that acceptance and even integration into the new normal of like, okay, we're working from home. We're doing okay. We're getting used to everything being on Zoom. We can be outside, so it's a little bit easier. I can still socialize. And then in the last couple of weeks, as we have gone into winter, the numbers are rising. It is a challenging time. The holidays are coming up. I don't know about you, but I definitely went right back into like anger and depression zone as well. And the thing is, this looks like a nice, neat curve, but it isn't this way. Even if things were kind of normal and we were going forward and going out of the tunnel in a pretty direct way, your feelings don't operate like this on a pretty curve. It looks a lot more like this, where one day you're maybe at acceptance and you're feeling good and you're feeling productive and you're like, yes, I've got this, we can do this. And then something happens where you find out that numbers rise, or you find out that school is going from in-person to hybrid to distance learning again, or you have to cancel a vacation, or you have to cancel Thanksgiving plans, and you go right back to anger and depression in the space of a minute. I know last week I was feeling good, and then a Facebook memory popped up in my Facebook on a dinner that I'd held for 15 of my friends 3 years ago. And just seeing that one picture of 15 of us crammed into this one little picture around a dinner table, all laughing and having a good time, put me right from acceptance back into sadness, right into sadness of thinking, when am I going to be able to do that again? That's hard. It's hard to think about. So know that wherever you are, whatever emotions you are feeling are completely and totally normal. It is very normal to be all over the place, to be feeling great one day and then in a completely different position 5 minutes later because of one little thing that happened. And it's completely normal. So I want to hear from you. Where are you at today? So if you could go into the chat. Yeah, Anna says it's like whiplash. Absolutely. It really can feel that way. I think that's a really accurate way of putting it. So I want to hear from you just today. Where are you at today, anywhere? And I don't know that any of us can be at awareness, but you could be anywhere else along the spectrum, really. Irritation to acceptance. I like that. Irritation. Yeah, that's a good way. Exhausted. Yeah, Laura, the exhausted part is probably part of that low piece here where you're just tired, right? Like physically tired, emotionally tired. I told my mom last night that I thought people were emotionally busy right now because there's just so much taking up space inside of us. Yeah, I see, so depression about the holidays, maybe acceptance about other places, but that depression about the holidays, acceptance and frustration. Yeah, deja vu. Absolutely. I feel like we're in like round 2 of this right now, right? Quite a few people in acceptance, which is fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of a combination of here between that kind of depression, that low point. And when I say depression too, that I'm not talking about clinical depression. This is, really that sad, low energy, low productivity, overwhelm, tiredness, kind of that whole piece is that really that depression piece. So a lot of people flipping between those as well. Yeah, which completely makes sense. And that's okay. Yeah. Best if you think about not missing restaurants. Yeah. So we all have our things, right? Like I don't really miss restaurants at all. And for other people, that is a huge deal. So we're all dealing with this in different ways, and different things can really set off those emotional pieces. And really what's happening here, the reason that you're feeling, especially a lot of this exhaustion and the overwhelm, is we are all experiencing uncertainty fatigue right now. Our bodies were not meant to deal with uncertainty on this long-term basis at the high level that we have it right now. We are meant to surge and then to relax and then to surge and then to come back and relax. And we've been in this heightened state for months and months and months. And that means that it's taking our bodies more energy. And that's why we are tired. We are tired. And then just not knowing what's coming next can add to that as well. And on top of that, because this is a group for women, I'm sure we have some people who don't identify as women on the call as well, but we know that women, particularly mothers, are being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic from an emotional and practical standpoint. And this is not a ding at men at all. There are plenty of men who are stepping up to the plate in many, many different ways. But we just know that even in normal time, whatever normal means anymore, but in kind of non-pandemic times, women tend to take on a more emotional load in their households, particularly mothers, but women on the whole. So even in heterosexual, heteronormative marriages or partnerships where duties are split equally from a practical standpoint, women take on more of the emotional load, meaning that you are the ones who are orchestrating behind the scenes. Typically, you're the one remembering that it's dress up day at daycare, the allergies, or who's going where and what, and doing all of that orchestration in your head, which takes a lot of energy and time. And with the pandemic, that has just increased to an even higher level. And we know that women, also mothers particular, are taking on more responsibilities for schooling overall than men are. More women have dropped voluntarily out of the workforce because of the stress associated with the pandemic. And we know that research has said that women are more worried about falling short on performance at work because of those competing priorities and how to balance it all. And I saw a lot of you put that into the chat right at the beginning, just as far as how do I balance this? How do I find the time to even think about self-care or the capacity of it? How do I do work and worry about my kids all at the same time? And I should also point out, yes, mothers are at a whole different level, and I'm not a parent myself. So I think I can say from an outside perspective, mothers are having this at a whole different level, but women on the whole do tend to take on a greater emotional load, whether that's with your colleagues, your friends, your family, clients, any of that. So this is something, there are deeper cultural roots here that we don't have time to get into today, but know that if you are feeling this maybe even more than some of the men that are in your life, there is a reason for that. All right, so what can you do about it? That was kind of the why and the what behind, the emotions that you are feeling related to the ongoing uncertainty, and some of the reasons why you might be feeling this even greater than other people, or that, culturally speaking, why women are feeling this at a higher level. But there is some things you can do about it, and this is not about fixing anything. This is not about changing the external situation, because we know that, yes, of course, there is personal responsibility that we can take control over, but we can't control the pandemic. We can't control the external environment. So these are things that you can all do personally to manage your own wellness, particularly over the next couple months, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are still in the tunnel. So we're going to be managing both those things. And I want you to be able to move through that tunnel in a way that is going to be manageable for you. I don't want to make it sound easy, but we'll just use the word manageable. All right, so the very first thing that you can do, which I think is the most important thing, and it sounds so simple, but we just don't really do it that often, is to feel your feelings. And I know so often we don't feel like we have the time to feel them, or we don't feel like it's polite, or we don't know how to even feel and release our feelings. You have so many things on your to-do list that you're like, I don't have time to sit down and feel my feelings. What are you talking about? And at the same time, we know that this is a critical piece, because when you don't release and feel your feelings, that is when burnout and exhaustion happens. And I'm going to do a quick demonstration. I tried this yesterday and it worked. I didn't spill water all over myself. So we're going to try it again today. But if you think of you as this empty glass right now, and in normal times, you're kind of probably full up, halfway, 2/3 of the way full already, with different things that are going on in your life, kind of the normal work things, kid things, family things, financial things. I mean, just kind of all the normal stressors in your life. But then on top of that, and sometimes even those can overflow, but on top of that right now, you have taking up space is, worrying about staying 6 feet away from everyone, worrying about or thinking about what holidays are going to look like this year, and if you're going to be alone on the holidays, or if you're going to be able to give your kids a good holiday this year. You're thinking about moving to distance learning, or you are worried about your parents, or maybe yourself, or your friend who is immunocompromised, and suddenly you are completely overflowing. And that's what's happening right now. There's no space. There's no space for any of this. So you have to create some space. And the way that you create that space is by releasing your emotions, because when you are full up all the time, that's when you have burnout, that's when you have exhaustion. And this can look different for different people. Sometimes it is just tiredness, but sometimes it's outbursts. Sometimes it's feeling that lack of patience, like everything just sets you off. So what can you do about that? I created this 3-step process for feeling your feelings several years ago because I was not feeling my feelings. I realized this when I was about to move to Australia for a year for work, and I just didn't, I felt like I was so busy. I did not have any time to feel anything. And yet I had a lot of feelings and anxiety about moving halfway across the world by myself. And I didn't allow myself to feel any of them until I got on a call with a friend of mine and cried for an entire hour straight, which at the time was probably the best thing that I could have done. But at the same time, it would have been better to let that out a little bit at a time. So I created this 3-step process. It is nothing revolutionary, but it is so helpful to actually do. And the first step is something that we don't talk about very often. And that is to give yourself permission to stop and feel. Because if you don't give yourself that permission to stop and take a breath and feel whatever it is you're feeling, you'll never get to the release part, which is what we actually need to do. So give yourself that permission when you feel emotions coming on, when you feel that build up inside of you, give yourself permission to stop and feel. I know that not every situation in the moment is going to feel like the right time and place to do that. That's okay. You can come back later and give yourself permission to stop and feel. The second one is to name the emotion without judgment. And I really purposely put that judgment piece in there because I hear from so many people that, oh, I have it so much better than so many other people. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be grateful for what I have. You can be grateful and completely overwhelmed and exhausted at the same time. Like, they are not mutually exclusive feelings. And there's no should when it comes to your emotions. You are just feeling whatever it is you're feeling. So naming it without judgment, like, I am sad right now. I am overwhelmed. I am discouraged. I am frustrated. Any of those things, like any of those, just name that emotion without judgment. And that's going to be really, really important. And then the third and most important step here is to release that emotion, because in the releasing, if we go back to this water here, in the releasing, that's when you create extra space. You do things to release the emotion, to create the space, and it doesn't make the thing go away, but it creates the space so you aren't overflowing. And I got a text. It was funny. I got a text from my mom. I spilled water all over my desk doing that. So I got a text from my mom the day after the election saying that, she said, after a restless night of sleep because of the indecision, I got up and I decided to write a card to a friend whose husband had COVID and to do a Pilates class. And she specifically said, it didn't change anything, but I feel better. And that's what this is about. It's not about changing the situation. It's about feeling better and getting that release so that you have more space inside of you. And there are a number of different ways to release your emotions. These are my 3 favorite ways that work really well for me. So sometimes I just need a good cry. I have to tell you, I moved to Colorado on October 1st. The 2 previous months prior to moving, in addition to kind of all the things that we all have going on in the world right now, I released my book, I launched a coaching program, and I moved between Minnesota and Colorado. So a lot of really big things were happening in my life. And I purposely, because I knew in the past I had not done a good job at releasing and naming my emotions, I really tried to give myself that space to feel my emotions as they came up. And they still kind of built up, not nearly as bad as they had in the past, but about a week and a half after I got here on a Saturday night, I finally had this whole day that was just kind of on my own and quiet, which I hadn't had in months. Like, my weekends had been taken up by packing and book release and all of these different things. And I just sat down on a Saturday night and cried for like 45 minutes. And I wasn't even sad. I didn't really even know what the emotion was, but it needed to come out. That crying needed to come out. And it helped so much. It created so much more space inside of me. So crying is a great way to release those emotions. Writing is another great way that really helps me. I am a writer. I love to write. And so that helps me to process and get my emotions out there. And then I have to say, on a day-to-day basis, dancing is definitely my number 1 way of releasing emotions. I dance like a lot of people meditate. almost every morning I dance to one or two songs. And this really started at the beginning of the pandemic. I've always enjoyed dancing. I'm not good at it. It happens in this room with the door shut. But I love to dance, and it really gets me in my body and helps to move those emotions out of me. And I will tell you, the 2-song combo of Florence and the Machine, Shake It Off, and then Meghan Trainor's Feel Better When I'm Dancing, those 2 songs seem to be a magical elixir because you can literally shake off the emotions and move your body and move that energy through you. So these are the 3 things that work for me. But there's a ton of different ways to release emotions. We know that any kind of physical activity is really the #1 and easiest way to release emotions. If you live with someone else, a really giant, long bear hug, so like a 20-second plus bear hug, really good belly laugh, so that true release where you're laughing, any kind of creative expression, and even positive social interaction, even if it's not in person, can really help to release those emotions as well. So I want to hear from you. What works for you to release emotions? Because there's no right or wrong here, and those 3 things that work really well for me might not be what works for you. But I want to hear from you. And I also I'm glad there's another dancer in the room. Yes, kitchen dancer. I agree. Singing also really helps for me. There's something about that kind of dancing, singing, music piece. Yeah, I hear singing in the car, yoga and hugs. Yeah, yoga and exercise, but definitely need to do more dancing. There is something very magical about dancing that it also reconnects you to your body and just gets you out of your head if you're someone that has some ruminating and circling that happens in your head. Yeah, a good belly laugh, so like getting comedy out there. Absolutely. Hikes outside. Yeah, I'm a huge hiker as well. That helps too. Conversation with a old friend. Yeah. Cranking up your favorite songs, playing the piano, working out, weights or kickboxing. Yeah, there's something about that like really hard hard exercise that gets that emotions out too. Walking your dog. Mhm. Reading. Yeah, finding a book that helps you to get those feels out. I know I've heard that from some people who know they need to cry, but they have a hard time initiating it, will actually put on a sad movie or read a sad book that they know will help them to release that because they know they need it, but they need a little help getting there. So yeah, this is perfect. So many different ideas that you can see from other people here as well, and know that none of these are wrong. It's just about figuring out, they're all right is probably a better way of saying it. It's about figuring out what works for you, but knowing that you need a way to release those emotions. That's really the biggest thing to keep in mind here. So give yourself permission to feel, name that emotion, name that emotion as it's coming up for you or later on when it's a better time and place for you to feel your feelings, and then do something to release it. And a lot of times that something can be very short. Sometimes we do need longer amounts of time, and this is something you can do reactively, when you're feeling those feelings come up, or it's something you can do proactively. So we know like regular physical activity or regular interaction with friends and laughter can help us to just manage emotions on the whole. So there will be times that you can do this proactively to keep a little bit more internally in balance, and times that you will need to do it on a reactive basis because those emotions are coming up strongly for you. All right, so that's piece #1. The second one here is to reset expectations and boundaries of yourself and others. And there's a couple reasons this is so important. So one, on the boundaries piece in particular, we got into this COVID space literally over the course of a weekend last March. No one did this on a planful basis. We went into this totally in survival mode, thinking it was going to be temporary. No one planned to be working from home from the next 8 to 12 to 15 months. We just jumped into it. And so now is a great time to take that step back and say, what about this is actually working? And what do I need to change to make this work better, both individually, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do if you are on a work team, some ways you can bring that up with your work team as well. Then on top of that, with just this resetting expectations, we already talked about how much space emotions are taking up inside of you right now. We need to recognize that and know that we don't always have the capacity to operate at the same level that we did pre-pandemic. Some days you might, some days are going to be great, but that's not going to happen every single day. And we have a really high push in our culture for productivity. We tend to get a lot of messages every single day around that, your productivity, you are worth what you produce. This plays in a lot to the imposter syndrome of perfectionism that if you were in that session before, but they're all related. And I mean, I remember at the beginning of COVID, there were a lot of things going out there like, well, Shakespeare wrote his greatest masterpiece during the plague. What can you do? And you don't have to write the greatest masterpiece. You don't have to learn a language. You don't have to do any of those things. It's about figuring out what is going to work for you. So on an individual basis, thinking about resetting expectations and boundaries, first thing is to give yourself permission to do less. And yes, you'll notice that give yourself permission was on the feeling your feelings page as well, because a lot of that is like, we can't wait for other people to give us permission to do less, to say no, to feel our feelings, to set boundaries. You can have conversations that can help you with some of that, but this is a place where you have to give yourself permission and give yourself permission to do less. And I know there are places and times where you have to show up, like you have to show up to that meeting, you have to show up to that client. But on those days when you're feeling at that low point of low productivity, exhaustion, frustration, you don't also have to finish your book for book club. You don't also have to have a great meal on the table. You don't have to finish that project that's optional, but you feel like is hanging over your head either at work or at home. You can give yourself permission to do what is required, but not anything more than that. I know that's hard, particularly for those of you who are used to being productive, who are used to getting a lot done. But this is going to be that really key piece of like, what really has to get done and what can I purposely procrastinate? Maybe just to tomorrow, maybe until March. But what are those things that you don't have to do? You don't have to do them, and give yourself permission to do less. And get real honest with yourself about what you really have to do too. Frequently, we have more permission to do less and to say no than we feel like we do. So really challenge yourself on that. The second one here goes right along with that, and it enables you to do less, which is getting clear about what's most important to you. So when you know exactly what's most important, what relationships are most important, what are the most important pieces in your life, what's most important at work, when you know that, then it makes it easier to not do the things that are lower on the list. And I'm not saying those things aren't important at all, but they can be less important than the critical things. And on those days or those weeks when you just don't have the energy, focus on those really critical things and get clear on what's most important. You can say no to other things that are on the less important scale or come back to them later. And then finally, several of you talked about this, whoever wrote in, my bedroom is my gym, is my office, that is such a huge issue right now. And so many people are working and doing everything in the same place. Your office is now a desk in your bedroom, or it's the kitchen table. And how can you set boundaries between work and home, both emotionally and from a very practical structural standpoint? So I'm going to share a few ideas that have worked for me or that I've heard from other people, but I want you to share in the chat too, because this is a place where you all have just as many, if not more, ideas than I do about what has helped you to set boundaries, particularly between work and home. But it could be with other things as well. But basically just what has helped you to set boundaries to create greater space in your life. And so again, go into the chat and share some ideas. I'm going to share a few of mine that have worked really well for me. So one, I took my work email off my phone because I am 10 feet away from my laptop 90% of the time. I also don't need to be having the temptation to look at my work email when I'm watching TV at night or when I'm on a hiking trail. If there's a critical thing that I need to put the email back on there for a day or two, it is not hard to put it back on and then I can delete it again. But I just don't need that additional piece on or hanging over me where I'm tempted to look at it. Another thing that I've heard from a lot of people is, particularly if you have like a desk or your office is in your bedroom, literally cover it up at night. Get a cheap sheet, a blanket, and cover it up. So it's still there, but you're not seeing it. It is hidden away from your view. Or if you're working at the kitchen table, pack up your stuff at the end of the day and put it in a bag and put that bag in the closet so that you can't see it. Again, some of these really simple things around structural pieces can really allow you to create better structure. And then the other piece someone brought up, like, I don't have my commute time anymore. I have heard that from so many people, that I don't have this commute time, so I'm just working during what would have been my commute time. So you're working more on either end of the day. And instead, you can take that as a purposeful commute time where you are taking a 15-minute walk or listening to a podcast. So you are still getting some kind of transition time at the beginning, at the end of the day, whatever that looks like for you. So I can see a ton of things coming into the chat. So I'm going to hop up there and see what ideas you're sharing as well, because I think this is great. Scheduling exercise after work. Yeah, packing up everything at the end of the day. I'm glad to hear that other people are doing that, because I think that's really great. You moved your desk from the dining room table. Yeah, I mean, some of those little things, just the structural pieces, shutting everything down and then shutting the door. So if you have a separate space where you are working, shutting the door and just moving it away. There is so much to be said for out of sight, out of mind. And it works with multiple things too. I do this with peanut butter, because otherwise I will eat peanut butter with a spoon. But if it's hiding on the top shelf and I have to get a chair to go down and get it and I don't see it, it doesn't happen nearly as often. Yeah, I love this. So taking 2 15-minute breaks away and a full lunch hour. I love that you're doing this. So I hear from so many people, Nicole, that say, I just can't do that. And while I'm not going to assume what your workday is like, I love hearing that there are people who are doing this, because I think it gives all of us greater permission to take those breaks during the day and just block the time on your calendar. Get outside, even if it's cold. We need the sunshine. We need to get out there. Yeah, let's see a few other ideas. Yep, I'm seeing other people. I love this. Your dog tells you when the workday is over, so you listen to her. It's good. Those external cues, closing the office door, packing away everything. Absolutely. I talked to someone else who, when she wanted to signal to her family that she was going into a meeting that was important and she wasn't going to see them for a while, she actually said goodbye. Like, she would kiss her husband and say goodbye to her kids and be like, I'm going to work now for the next 2 hours. It's kind of as a signal to not bother her. So it works in the other direction as well. Yeah, I love this. So perfect. Ooh, you put a do not disturb on your phone from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Ooh, that's a great idea. I could probably do well with that one as well. Perfect. Thank you. So these are great, like really structural pieces that you can do. And I mean, the emotional side, I know sometimes it's harder to say no, but putting the structure in place, like the environmental structure, can really help you to set better boundaries with work. But then for those of you who are on teams, I want to point this out. And I know some of you have coworkers here today, which is fantastic. So you can really talk about this together. But even if you're just the only person from your organization, you can bring this back to your team. Just like you, everyone on your team jumped into this without preparing much, without knowing what to do. And this is a great time, without any blame at all, to be able to bring, if you're a leader, if you're a manager, you can bring this up with your team, or if you're a team member, bring this up with your manager to talk about on your next team meeting, to talk about boundaries and set some expectations and guidelines and what works for your team. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So one, like I said, most of us didn't do this on purpose. So it's just a good time to go back and say what's working for all of us and what's not, to try and prevent or manage some of that burnout as we are getting deeper into this for the next several months. But also because oh, I apologize. I completely just lost my train of thought. So we'll jump into what these things are, and then it'll probably come back to me. So first of all, creating the space and time on your team to share what you need and how you are doing. Truly share how you are doing. I'm a contractor with an organization called Mentium, which is a fantastic organization located in the Twin Cities that does cross-company mentoring. And I'm a contractor for them, so I'm a part of some of their team meetings. And when the pandemic started, they started having a weekly half-an-hour check-in that was only about how are you doing. There was no work on the agenda at all. And now it is every 3 weeks, but it's not as frequent, but it's still only about how are you doing, or things that are related to our wellness and our overall emotions. It's not a check the box agenda at all. It is about all of us as humans. And I can't tell you what a difference that has made in getting to know people and understanding where they're coming from, and allowing people that time and space to show up as real humans, how they are. And it doesn't take much time. Like I said, this is 30 minutes every 3 weeks. But where it's not about work, it's just about you as a human. So that's a great thing to bring up either with your team if you're a manager, or with your manager. But then there's this other piece, and this is what I was going to say before. agreeing on some guidelines as a group, because we frequently feel like we only have this much permission to do things when in reality we probably have this much permission, but we don't know what the permission is that we have. And oftentimes you can just take that permission too, but it can be more comfortable to agree upon, like, okay, these are our parameters as a team, and we know that we can totally play within these parameters because we have agreed upon them as a team. And there's a couple of topics that I found to be particularly helpful. Now that we're all texting so much and group text chains are really big, agreeing on what are your guidelines, like who wants to be on those group text chains, and sometimes people are texting at 9 p.m. at night and it's not officially work related, like maybe it's something silly or funny that they're texting you, but it's still a colleague. It's still bringing you away from the people or the thing that you're doing in the evening and back towards that mindset of work. And you might be okay with that, but not everyone is. And so talking about, when is it okay to text? When is it okay to call people? And then also discussing those response times and taking breaks in particular. Because I think it was Nicole who said, taking those breaks during the day. A lot of people that I've talked to feel like they can't do that. Like they can't get away from their computer for 15 minutes or to go for a walk during the middle of the day. Talk about it. Talk about taking those breaks with your team. Is that okay for you? Do you need to communicate if and when you are leaving your computer, or can you just take that time for yourself during the day, as long as it's not longer than an hour, or whatever the case may be. Have that conversation and agree upon these things, because then you will have those parameters. And this is really going to help all of you on your team to set better boundaries and to prevent burnout, which I can tell you your employer definitely wants as well, because you will be more productive. You will be more likely to stay in your role and at the company if you have some of these things. Plus, your engagement will be better because you're just checking in with people on that human level, which is really important. All right, so these are some things you can do to set boundaries with yourself, set expectations that might be different right now, and to set boundaries with your team. I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions before we move on to the final piece that you can do for yourself. Yeah. And yes, I did know someone right here, Go Team Walzer. I knew that there were a lot of people in this call that were all from the same team. So you can bring this back to your organization and have some of those conversations as well, which is fantastic. All right, I'm just going to pause it. Give you a second to put any questions into the chat. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. We should have a minute or two at the end as well for any questions that come up. All right, so the final piece of this is getting through the winter. And this is an actual picture of Minneapolis. I didn't take it, but I found it online. And we've all experienced these days, right? And I know a lot of people have really just been dreading winter. And instead of dealing with it, they are in that denial stage when it comes to winter, even though winter is, it's right upon us right now. And I know you've already had several snowstorms. We've actually had a couple here in Colorado as well. And so what can you do to create that personal plan to get through this winter? Because it's going to be different from previous winters, but you are still going to have wellness needs, overall needs that you need to meet, but in a completely different way. And so this is going to be part personal reflection, because I want you to be able to walk away with a plan of how you are going to get through this winter, so that we aren't in just dread and denial, but instead have some proactive things that you can plan for and do in order to move through the winter in a more manageable way. So the first thing I want you to do, and this is just personal reflection, you can put it into the chat if you want to, but I'm not expecting you to, is to just take a moment and write down what you need. So think about socially, what do you need for your physical health, your mental health, and anything else that's popping up for you. So for some people, spirituality or religious practices are really important. Maybe you're a huge quilter, and in the past you got together with friends to quilt every week and you're not doing that. So you need to meet that need in a different way. And anything like that, anything that's important to you. What do you need socially for your physical and mental health, and then anything else that's important to you? For example, I'm an extrovert who lives alone most of the time. And so I need in-person social time. If my entire social life is on Zoom for the next 5 months, I will not be a happy person. I'm okay with part of it being that way. It's a great way to connect with people, but it cannot be 100%. So because that is true for me, then what am I going to do? So that's just one example of what I personally need. So I want you to take a minute, and I'm just going to be quiet and have you write down, what do you need? Okay, if you're still working in that, keep going. Now we're going to talk about how you can meet those needs this year. And that's likely going to be different than how you've met them in the past. So for example, if you're someone who used to go to a gym 4 days a week, you're not going to be doing that this winter. So whatever needs you had related to physical activity or the social aspect of the gym, you're going to need to meet them in a different way. So I can see some people popping into the chat already, and I'll go there in a minute, but I'm going to walk through a few ways to think about meeting your needs in a different way. But I also want you to be sharing in the chat as well as I'm going through this, just as far as how you can meet your needs in a different way. So the first one is to do things outside that you have not done outside in the past in the winter. So this is an example of a bonfire. Can you have a bonfire in the snow with your family or with a couple of friends where you can social distance? I was talking to a friend of mine and she just bought a pair of snow pants for the first time since she was 12 years old because she was like, this is going to happen. I have to go outside. It doesn't matter. I cannot be inside all the time. I have to get outside this year. It's just going to have to be the way that it is. If you are used to having outdoor happy hours with friends in the summer, on those days when it's 30 degrees outside or 35 degrees outside, can you all bring a sleeping bag and your chair and sit in the driveway anyway with a glass of wine? These things, like, we really can do some of these things. They just take a little bit extra and a little bit of a mindset flip of, oh, that could actually be pleasant. Like, this could be fun. We might not sit out here for 4 hours, but we could probably all sit out here inside of a sleeping bag for an hour and not even be cold and have a glass of wine in our hands. So that's part one of this, is just doing things outside that you typically would have done inside, and really getting in both the mindset and the physical preparedness, like snow pants or sleeping bags, that you need to do that. Art is another great one, just to get some of those art supplies going, craft things. Like, it's a great way to release emotions, a great way to get your creativity out there, try something new and different. Scheduling time with friends. So having a call or a Zoom call or in-person time can be a great way to just make sure, particularly those of us who live alone, or those of you who are getting sick of your families and need some external social stimulation and interaction, putting time on the calendar so that you can have that happen. I know for me, like I said, I am an extrovert who needs in-person social time, and I have a friend who lives about 15 minutes away from me, and we have already agreed that once a week we're going to go for a walk outside, no matter what the temperature is. And we're both great with that. Like, we will buckle up, we will put on what we need to put on so that we can get outside and both get the exercise, the sunshine that we need, and to see each other, because she is an extrovert as well, with 2 little kids and a partner at home, and needs that time both outside of the home and social time too for her. All right. Another one is to take up a new winter sport. I mean, if you've never snowshoed before, this might be the year to try some snowshoeing. If you've never cross-country skied before, try something new, put yourself out there. It'll be really fun. And maybe even plan for something that could be legitimately something to look forward to, like dog sledding, or like a night at an Airbnb, at a cabin an hour away. Any things like that, like something on the calendar that you can really look forward to, that maybe you've even thought about doing different winters, but just haven't gotten there. So we really need things to look forward to this year. The one thing I didn't put on here is holiday traditions in a different way. I mean, holidays are gonna look different this year than they have in the past. So how can you still get that festivity, knowing that they're not going to necessarily be easy, but how can they still be okay for you? Or how can you do things differently, so that there is still joy in the holiday season as well? All right, so I can see a bunch of ideas. I want you to share in the chat, what are you going to be doing differently this year to meet those needs? So whatever you just identified on the past slide, as far as your social, mental health, emotional health, physical health, how are you going to meet those needs this year? And I'm going to say yes. So here we go. Let's see what people have put in there. Yeah, I view winter as something to be enjoyed, not endured. And you get cute boots and a jacket that are warm and fashionable. I love that. So something that makes it fun, right? Like, you're putting yourself out there, you're doing something that makes it fun. Absolutely. Yeah, bought an exercise bike. Yeah, inside exercise bike. I just had some friends who bought fat tire bikes for the first time so that they can bike outside. Oh, you went to Google to pull a list of hobbies to see if you can try something new. I love that. Yeah, finding different ways to exercise. Yep, social happy hour time. Yeah, I know, I miss it too. It's so how can we find that way in a different way? Yeah, a lot of gear for winter running. Absolutely. I mean, all of these things dusted off the treadmill / laundry hanger. I love that admission. Absolutely. It was a laundry hanger, and this winter it is going to be a treadmill. So great. I mean, so you're getting the release of your emotions in that, you're getting the physical activity, you're getting the exercise, meeting so many needs at once by doing something like that. Yeah. Snowshoeing is a great way because snowshoeing requires no skill. Like if you can walk, you can snowshoe. So it's it's an easy thing to do for lots of different ages and ability levels. You can do it anywhere, and it's really fun and beautiful. So yeah. All right. Going sledding. Yeah, I love this. So go sledding with your kids rather than watch through the window. Love that. Take a ski lesson with your kids, Zoom happy hour with girlfriends. Game night. My group of friends has done amazing things with game night and different things over Zoom. We've played a Guess Who version. We've done a ton of trivia nights. Scattergories works really well over Zoom because you can just take a picture of the card and send it to everyone who's playing. We are going to do a Great British Bake Off via Zoom in December. My group of friends, as someone sent out that thing, an organization of that just this week. So you can really get creative and have legitimate fun via Zoom as well. So we just need to think about things in a different way. Yeah, planning weekly holiday dates with your mom who's living alone. I love that. So that's like a win-win for both of you. Absolutely. As someone who lives alone, I very much appreciate when people reach out to me too. And I create a lot of opportunities for myself because I know I need them too. All right. Okay, so let's move forward. So hopefully you have a bit of a plan so that there's some fun things to look forward to that are going to take care of your needs and actually have some fun on the calendar too. It doesn't have to be winter, doesn't have to be dread. We can recognize the challenging and that emotions that are there and also have some fun and joy in the process too. They can both be there at the same time or in the same season. All right, one final word that I want to say. So we've covered all the basics here around, the emotions behind change, giving yourself permission to feel your feelings and to release them, resetting boundaries and expectations, and creating a plan for winter. And if that's not enough, because this webinar is like level 1, and if you are at level 3 or 4, please do go seek professional help. There is no shame in seeking out a therapist, a licensed social worker, a counselor. This is a good time to do that. If anxiety is high, if the overwhelm is high, they can help you with some personalized ways to manage the things that are going on, because it's amped up for everyone right now. So this is a great time to reach out if you need additional assistance. All right. So with that, I would love to hear one, maybe 2 things that you are going to do as a result of our session today. So just 1 or 2 actions that you are going to take. Could be something new you're going to try, giving yourself permission to feel your feelings, a conversation you're going to have with your team, anything. And I want you to share it in the chat. 1, to just share ideas and see what you're taking away and get ideas from each other, but also because we know when you think about it and then you put it and you share it in the chat, you're going to be more likely to do it and follow through. So let's hear what those are for you. Buy winter gear. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can see someone just sent me a private message. I'm going to ask, I don't want to call that person out, but if you could send me an email later, I'll give you my email in a second. If you have any private questions that you don't want to talk about in the larger group, things that have come up, feel free to email me later and I can get back to you via email. Yeah, perfect. Definitely bonfire happy hour, plan for new outdoor activities, turn your email and phone off after 5 p.m. Yeah. Talking with some colleagues about making a daily dance party group text. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, Ashley, that's so fun. Each of you pick a different song each day and have a group dance party. That's a good team. I want to be on that team. Meditation, new winter hobby, sport. Yeah, actually pick one thing to do and pick that new hobby. Yep. Laura, if you want to put that into the chat, what that one thing is right now, you can do that too. Then you'll know. Virtual game night with your friends, new craft activity. Yep. Give yourself some time to complete artistic projects and puzzles. Make some of your holiday gifts personally. That's a really fun idea. Yeah, awesome. So these are fantastic. I love all of these. So anything that you're going to do to implement is just fantastic. And if you want to dive deeper, I want to offer two really great resources. One of them is my book, so that feels a little bit self-serving to say it's a great resource. But I will tell you, the first one is this book, Burnout. I'm only halfway through this book, and it's so good that I am very confident of recommending all of it to you. It is written also specifically for women. It's called The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. It's not about the pandemic, but my goodness, the timing could not be any better. And also the two authors, Amelia Nagoski and Emily Nagoski, who are twin sisters, were on Brene Brown's Unlocking Us podcast about a month ago. So if you want to get a taste of what the book is about, go listen to that podcast, but it's really fantastic. And then if you identify at all as a overdoer, overachiever, perfectionist, people pleaser, anything in that category at all, this is my book, which is on the screen too, An Overachiever's Guide to Breaking the Rules, How to Let Go of Perfect and Live Your Truth, which is really about how do we get into the space of the overdoing, the perfectionism, and how do you reconnect to who you really are, which is a lot about that self-care of reclaiming your joy, reconnecting to your body, resetting boundaries. We talk about all of that in this book. And if you ordered, I send out a signed copy directly from me. I do all the shipping myself. So that is on my website as well, which is just heatherwhelpley.com/book. And I'll put that into the chat in just a moment as well. All right, makes a good holiday gift too. And then finally, we have a couple minutes here for questions. If you want to connect with me further, my name is Heather Whelpley. I am Heather Whelpley everywhere, and I think I'm the only one of me out there. So if you Google me, you will find me. My website has all the information about all my services, speaking, my book, coaching, that kind of thing. My email is heather@whelpleyconsulting.com, and then LinkedIn is the best place on a social media perspective to connect with me. And if you want to get on my email list, you can text the word BOLD4 to 66866. And I also send you 10 scripts to say no without apologizing, which can also help with boundary setting. So that is all the different ways that you can connect with me later on here. And as we're doing that, I'll open it up to any questions that you have, and I'll put the direct link to my website, to the book for my website, into the chat as well. But please go ahead and put any questions that you have into the chat. We have a couple minutes to answer them.
And I would also invite you guys to undo your cameras if you wanted to, and your microphones if you would prefer to ask a verbal question. We can totally
absolutely
do that as well.
Yes, definitely. So we'll give people just a minute. You can ask a question of anything we talked about today or related subject.
There was some amazing things in here, Heather. I think we could talk about this for, I don't know, another hour. And
probably.
And if we could break up into small groups and, you know, have some conversations around that, that would be amazing. I will send out a post-event email that has all of Heather's contact information, ways to get to these resources, that kind of thing. I'm thinking about going and compiling the whole chat because there's so many things in there I want to take advantage of that you guys are doing that I didn't think about.
You can actually save the chat, because this came up in a session I did yesterday. So I will tell you all, this is the third time I have done this topic in the last 21 hours. It is an extremely popular topic right now. So if you want to bring this back to your organization, I do a lot both with women's networks and teams and organizations as a whole. So keep that in mind. This is a topic a lot of people are resonating with right now. And they were saying the same thing. How do we compile these great ideas?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Couple things that I just want to call out that resonated with me was the whole letting go of shoulds and giving yourself permission to do these things. I think a lot of times we depend on other people to give us permission, and we need to learn that we can give ourselves permission to do all kinds of things. The City of Bloomington, I live in Bloomington. The City of Bloomington has some opportunities on their website, and I can include that on the post-event email as well, for outdoor things that they are hosting this year. Somebody in here said that they Googled, activities and that kind of thing. Use the technology at your fingertips, and I know there are other cities who are working together to provide their residents some options, some socially distanced, safe gatherings, outdoor, whatever. I know obviously we live in a cold climate, but there is a contingent of people. Dana, I think you were one that said, that you try to embrace the winter and not see it as something to endure, unlike me. So that's something that I need to work on, is actually getting out there and doing those things. I did buy Heather's book last night. I bought the Kindle version, so yay, no more clutter. And I'm already well into it. It is well written, super relatable, really good. I will make sure those links are in the post-event email. Quick other note, just from a chamber perspective, mark your calendars for Thursday, December 10th at 9 a.m. for our annual Minnesota Keystone celebration. Invite has gone out yesterday or today, so I will include a registration link to that. Moving Forward, Giving Together should be an excellent program. There will also be a survey in the post-event email, and there is a section in there for topics that you all would like to see this series cover in the future. We would love to have your input on speakers, topics, ideas of what you want out of your Executive Women program. That is all I have. Thank you to our sponsors again today. Heather, can't thank you enough for coming back. I think this was fantastic. Thanks to all of you for being here. Have a great weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you in January.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all your amazing participation. It was a pleasure.